Pat Broeker and David Miscavige were involved in a power struggle to take over Scientology and its control after L. Ron Hubbard's death in January 1986. Recently, Aaron Smith Levin posted a video regarding this. We wanted to let you know more inside information regarding what happened during this power struggle. I worked for David Miscavige at the time. I was in charge of his office. And Janis Gillham Grady, my co-host, she also knew Pat Broeker from his early days on the Flagship Apollo and was also good friends with his wife, Annie Broeker. We were both there and we saw what happened. We wanted to let you know if you're interested in more information, watch this video. We put it out about 11 months ago. We think you'll find it informative and we hope you enjoy it.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our channel, our Scientology Stories, Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher, and I want to welcome you to our channel. And before we get started, I want to introduce my co-host, Janis Gillham Grady. Hi, Janis. How you doing today?
Hi, Mark. Doing good. Good day, everybody. What is today? Thursday after 2 o'clock. So I hope everybody got their stats in or upstat and ready for a good libs this weekend.
That's exactly right. Anyway, so whoops, I messed that up there. Here we go. Anyway, okay, great. So anyway, we want to thank everybody for being here. And go ahead and get in the chat, okay? Go ahead and tell us, let us know where you're from. We're going to tell the story about how David Miscavige took control over Scientology. And then also we're going to then take questions and answers afterwards. So if you've got any questions or anything like that, you know, go ahead and please write the word question above it. Okay, so we can star it and we don't miss it. All right. Okay, where we go? Somebody's here from Ireland, Germany, Glasgow, North Wales. We got a lot of people from Europe and the UK. That's great. Minnesota,
California,
yeah, and the US, Canada, Duluth, Michigan, and that's all good. And Oregon. And and that was your dog, right? Is that yours? Anyway, we have Janis's dog in here. She's taking them out. Anyway, we want to welcome everybody here. One of the things I just wanted to mention before we get started, we've got some new members to our channel. If you'd like to join, you just hit the join button on our YouTube page and follow the instructions if you want to join and be a contributor and supporter of our channel. But we have Bernard Carlin, Stephanie Sandoval, Mary Kay London, and Richard Dinnen are all new members of our channel. And I need Richard, Mary Kay, and Bernard, if you would email Janis, okay, at Janis Gillham Grady at gmail.com. If you would email her your contact information, that would be your name, address, phone number, that type of thing, and your email address, so that we can send you Janis's autographed books, because you all are peeling masters. So we wanted to mention that to you. Okay. All right, Janis. So we're ready to get started here?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. And you go ahead and star if you can, and we'll go from there. All right.
Okay.
All right. So what we did a part one a couple of weeks ago, and I know some of you have been waiting for it, which is basically, you know, that David Miscavige was not the anointed one. He claims that he was, but he wasn't. That wasn't the plan by L. Ron Hubbard in terms of what was going to happen with Scientology. Okay. So anyway, so we're going to go ahead and take you through that story. All right. This is how David Miscavige took control of Scientology. All right. It starts in the early 1980s. All right. This is the structure that L. Ron Hubbard basically laid out for the running of Scientology when he wasn't around, or, you know, when he was off the lines. Okay. On the left-hand side there, you can see the Executive Director International. That was a hat. A hat is a job in Scientology terms, but that is a hat that L. Ron Hubbard wore when he was at St. Hill. He was the executive director of Scientology for a long time. Anyway, he needed that hat taken over to oversee International Management Organization and then the Scientology organizations worldwide. And you can see that going down. This is a very simple diagram of it. There's much more detail to it, but that was the basic idea. The other job or hat that L. Ron Hubbard covered was the senior technical person in Scientology. He was the founder, and he was the one who developed the technology and researched it and all that jazz, right? Anyway, he created a post called the Senior Case Supervisor International, and that was the person who was the most senior technical person in Scientology, okay? And they would take over the hat or the job of technical delivery and also compiling new technical programs and things like that. And that was the Senior Case Supervisor. You can see that down on the right. There were 3 other organizations that were set up, okay, to oversee. Hubbard didn't trust management. Hubbard didn't trust people to always do their job. So he wanted a system of checks and balances. At the very top, you have the Church of Spiritual Technology, and they were the owners of the trademarks and copyrights of Scientology. Okay, and took them over, all right, and then when L. Ron Hubbard died, they were willed over there to them, okay? But they're the actual owners of the trademarks and copyrights and the materials. Religious Technology Center, or RTC, you can see them there. They police the trademarks usage. The job of Religious Technology Center was to oversee and check international management, Scientology organizations, and that type of thing, and even the Senior Case Supervisor to make sure that L. Ron Hubbard's policies and technologies were being properly applied, and if not, correcting them. There was a correction unit as well, okay? Below that, they weren't actually below, but the Watchdog Committee, and I wrote Watchdog Committee, I'm sorry about that. WDC, the Watchdog Committee, they were to oversee Scientology sectors, and this was the Commodore's Messenger Organization International. Janis, why don't you explain a little bit about WDC, how it started and all that?
Yes, WDC started in 79, early 79. When we just moved to Hemet, and he was at a location in Hemet, but he was not on the management lines like he wanted to be, so he assigned messengers to do that. And it started with Dee Riesdorf as the chairman. Gail was on it. Dave Miscavige was on it. Annie Taskett was on it. There's a bunch of various messengers. But Hubbard didn't want them to say who Watchdog Committee was. And no one was to know who they were. And I'd mentioned this before. So when management was asking, well, who are you? A photograph was sent of people lined up with paper bags over their heads because they weren't supposed to say who Watchdog Committee was. Anyway, it was broken down into sectors of Scientology, as in the Scientology Class 4, now Class 5 organizations, the Sea Org organizations, such as the Advanced Organization, the St. Hills in Los Angeles, Denmark, and UK. And there was also another sector which was for the Scientology missions, another sector for WISE, which was business enterprises using Scientology technology. Another sector was the Flag Service Org, and there was also Flag Estates. So those were the actual sectors, and Celebrity Center. So those were the sectors that the messengers, as Watchdog Committee members, oversaw, but they weren't supposed to manage. That was international management's job, and that they would manage through the liaison officers at continental level.
Right. Okay, great. So anyway, this is the basic structure. It's more detailed than that, but this is the basic structure of how Scientology was supposed to run when L. Ron Hubbard was not around, okay? So then we began David Miscavige in the early 80s, okay? And we start the Scientology, Game of Thrones. I don't know how many people have seen Game of Thrones, but this is Scientology's version of Game of Thrones, and we're going to explain it to everybody, okay? First things first, you had to have a conspiracy. You had to have two people that wanted to make things go their way, okay? And we've got Pat Broeker there on the left and David Miscavige on the right, okay? And basically, when Hubbard took off in, what was it, 79 or 80,
80.
he took Pat,
Early 80.
80. He took Pat and Annie Broeker with him. And Janis, you told the story that they were chosen because they were married and Pat was a guy, and you know, they didn't know how long they were going to be gone, but they were the ones who were chosen to take off with Hubbard. Is that right?
That's correct, Mark.
Okay. So anyway, so Pat Broeker was the communication line between Hubbard and Scientology. Okay. And without going into tremendous detail, the only way he could communicate was through dictaphone tapes and dispatches and boxes that would be met. You know, there would be couriers, and they'd be couriered by Pat Broeker and also a couple of other people later on. And they would meet up in a secret location because nobody knew where Hubbard was except Pat Broeker and a few other people, and Annie Broeker. And Miscavige eventually was chosen to meet with Pat Broeker because he was lonely and he liked to talk. He didn't get to see very much of anybody. Pat and Annie, basically all they had to deal with Hubbard as he got older and older. So, you know, they wouldn't just meet up at a coffee shop somewhere and just exchange boxes. Pat would sometimes talk all night. And some of the other people who went to do that, they didn't feel like sitting there all day. But Miscavige, he did. He would go there, and so he was chosen. And this is where they basically, in my opinion, developed a conspiracy that they were going to eventually take over, because they were the only communication to Hubbard, and Hubbard was who Scientology listened to. So this is where this all started. Hubbard communication line being controlled by David Miscavige through Pat Broeker to Hubbard. Okay. I told you about the Executive Directors International. So the first people that basically had to be taken out were the Executive Directors International that were running Scientology. Okay. And this is a photograph here. On the left is Carrie Gleason. On the right is Bill Franks. And of course, that's Janis in the middle. And Bill and Carrie are former Executive Directors International. Bill Franks was chosen first, and he was the Executive Director International. And he was involved in, you know, getting rid of the Guardian's office and lots of other things. But anyway, he got involved with the mission holders in 1982. We're not going to go into that story in depth, but basically he was targeted to be removed. He was called up to the international base at Gilman Hot Springs and then locked away under guard, basically, and not allowed to leave the base. And then he eventually was gotten rid of and left Scientology. And he was replaced by Carrie Gleason, who had been the commanding officer of the International Management Organization. And Carrie was a longtime Sea Org executive, tremendously experienced, expanded Scientology tremendously all over the world. And he was the one that was put in charge when Bill Franks was taken out. Well, again, another long story that we're not going to go into. Carrie Gleason was taken out in 1982, along with several other senior executives, based on reports that were sent by L. Ron Hubbard on Scientology's statistics and expansion. And he believed that the reports that were sent up there were false reports. And because Scientology was expanding, and Hubbard was issuing orders to basically, you know, wipe out a bunch of people and all that. So anyway, Carrie Gleason was taken out, and he was no longer the Executive Director International. So what did they do? Guillaume Leserve was gotten as the new Executive Director International, and he had been the commanding officer of Europe, and he had expanded Europe, and he was thought to be a good choice to be the Executive Director International. Okay. And he basically listened to Miscavige. Okay. He was in Miscavige's pocket along with other people that I'm going to show you here. Okay. All right. The next thing that you had to do, Miscavige had, and Pat Broeker had to take out David Mayo, who was the senior case supervisor international. Remember, on that structure, I told you the senior case supervisor international was going to oversee all of the technical delivery and all the new rundowns and tech and all that. And David Mayo had been a longtime Class 12, highly trained auditor in CS. As a matter of fact, Janis, he saved Hubbard's life, didn't he?
Yes, he did. When Hubbard got really sick in 1978, David was at Flag, and the messengers had him come up to La Quinta, where he audited Hubbard until he was well. And that's when they came up with knots together. And later on, even David was suing for the rights to knots because he wrote a lot of that.
Yeah, knots is new era Dianetics for OTs, and that's the levels that you do on OT 5, 6, and 7, where you're auditing body thetans and getting rid of them. Okay, and that technique was developed by David Mayo in conjunction with Hubbard, and so that's where that came from, and that created a tremendous technical boom in Scientology. The Flag Service Org in Clearwater started making millions of dollars on a weekly basis based on delivering that action. Anyway, Mayo had to be gotten rid of because he was given orders. Hubbard had entrusted Pat Broeker and David Miscavige with getting what was called an all clear, get rid of all of the lawsuits and all of the government interventions so that Hubbard could come out of hiding. Well, it wasn't going fast enough and he wasn't happy. So he ordered David Mayo confidentially to do a security check, sec check, Pat Broeker, to find out why isn't the all clear happening? What is Pat Broeker up to? What's his out ethics? Okay. And separately, David Miscavige was ordered to be sec-checked by Jesse Prince, who was working in Religious Technology Center at the time. And these reports of confessionals were supposed to be sent up to Hubbard, okay? But they were intercepted by Pat Broeker and DM. And David Mayo, make a long story short, he was he was gotten rid of at the same time that Kerry Gleason was gotten rid of, and he was kicked out of Scientology. And that's a whole nother story where he then went and delivered outside of Scientology. But Hubbard basically turned on Mayo based on reports sent up through David Miscavige and Pat Broeker, and they were gotten rid of. By the way, Hubbard never saw the knowledge reports from those security checks, because if he were, based on reports I've seen in several books that were written, and I think, Janis, you've heard this too, Pat and DM on some of their meetups on couriers were going to Las Vegas and gambling away L. Ron Hubbard's money and that type of thing. So they had some serious out ethics that if Hubbard had found out about, they would have been gotten rid of as well. So anyway, do you have anything to add on that real quick?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. That was good.
Okay. So anyway, Mayo was gotten rid of, and Ray Midoff was made the senior case supervisor international. And he had been the senior case supervisor in Clearwater, and before that at Celebrity Center. But he was highly trained, and he was the next obvious person to take over for David Mayo. So he was brought up to the international headquarters to be the senior case supervisor international. You had Mark Yeager, who was the Watchdog Committee chairman and the commanding officer of the Commoner's Messenger Org, okay? And there had been a couple of other, I think 2 or 3 Watchdog Committee chairmen before Mark Yeager that DM had orchestrated and gotten rid of, okay? But Yeager was a loyalist to David Miscavige. They had been friends. They had worked together in Cine at W, and they were pretty close, weren't they, Janis?
Yeah, they were pretty close. When Yeager actually, when Gail got removed, and we were trying to figure out who to put on next,
Gail Irwin, who had been the commanding officer of CMO Int that Miscavige got rid of. Go ahead.
Right, I'd actually suggested Yeager at the time, but DM suggested John Nelson, who had been his right-arm man in action. So John Nelson went on instead of Yeager, and then Nelson only lasted a few months, and then Yeager went on and lasted for years, actually.
Yeah. Anyway, so he was a David Miscavige loyalist, okay? L. Ron Hubbard dies in January 1986. These are photographs of Pat Broeker and David Miscavige announcing Hubbard's death, okay, and introducing international management to the public at the Hollywood Palladium. And this event was videotaped and then sent out to all organizations in the world. And this is a photograph from that event. On the stage there, on the left is Ray Midoff, who was the senior case supervisor international. Guillaume Leserve is the second from the left. He was the executive director international. The woman next to them is Vicky Asnaran, who was the inspector general for Religious Technology Center at the time. Okay. And then Heber Jentz on the right was the president of the Church of Scientology International. And not in the photo, because I think he's at the podium, is Mark Yeager, who was the Watchdog Committee chairman. So they were introduced at this event as international management that was going to oversee the expansion of Scientology. And if you see this here, this follows the pattern that I told you about at the very beginning. You had a senior case supervisor international, you had an executive director international, you had an inspector general for RTC, president of CSI was basically another position, and it was a public relations position for Scientology, and Mark Yeager, who was WDC chairman. That was supposed to be the way Scientology was run at that time. Okay, so Miscavige's point of view. Okay, in order to control things, Pat and Miscavige had to have somebody in charge of L. Ron Hubbard's estate, his inheritance, the money, and all that. And about a week before Hubbard died, Norman Starkey was made the executor of Hubbard's estate. Now, Norman Starkey was a longtime Sea Org member who also worked with Miscavige at Author Services, which was the for-profit corporation for Hubbard. Okay, and he was basically, his right-hand man, Miscavige's right-hand man. So he was in Miscavige's pocket. And as Janis mentioned to me earlier, Pat Broeker was going to be the executor and the trustee of L. Ron Hubbard's estate, but he was removed by Hubbard about a week before he died, and Norman Starkey was made the executor. But that was somebody that Miscavige controlled. Okay. Now, the other thing you have to do is when you pass away is you have to take care of the family. What about the family? They need to inherit some of this money. And so, Hubbard had a lot of money, right? So the Hubbard family, that had to be dealt with. Okay. This is Mary Sue and the kids with L. Ron Hubbard, right? And what they did was Miscavige and Norman, they paid out, based on the will, a pittance of what Hubbard had made. He had millions of dollars. I think each of the kids got $100,000. Mary Sue got more than that, and she got a house, okay? And basically, they were made to sign the paperwork on this. A bunch of Sea Org executives, including Miscavige, showed up at Mary Sue's house and basically confronted her. And this is laid out in books like by Jesse Prince and Mike Rinder and others. And she was basically forced to sign and not contest the will, because the money, the bulk, 95% of the money was going to go to the Church of Spiritual Technology for L. Ron Hubbard, so that if he ever came back, like he said he was going to do, his money and all that would still be there in Church of Spiritual Technology. Okay. Annie Broeker, she was overseeing, and she had been the inspector general for RTC, Religious Technology Center. And of course, she was with Hubbard all the way until he died, at the secret ranch in Creston. And she was an original Commodore's messenger and very close to Hubbard. And so it was expected, like when L. Ron Hubbard died, all of us started thinking, I know I did, oh, good, Pat and Annie are going to be able to come back to, the gold base and all that, and rejoin all their family and friends, right? Well, Annie was basically overseeing the Religious Technology Center, and she had two allies in there. The first one is Vicky Asnaran, who was the Inspector General for RTC, okay? And she was loyal to Pat as well as Annie for years. She was very loyal to them. And so she was in charge of the Religious Technology Center and built up this big organization that included overseeing the lawsuits at the Office of Special Affairs and all the activities they took. They also policed the trademarks and copyrights, like I mentioned, and they set up a correction unit as well. And her deputy was Jesse Prince. He was the Deputy Inspector General for RTC. Okay. All right. Pat Broeker. This is when Miscavige, I think, started to get suspicious of the brokers, Pat and Annie Broeker. This is Pat Broeker here. An issue was put out on LRH's death called The Sea Organization in the Future. And this was supposedly written by L. Ron Hubbard. And this is an issue where he said that he was going to go, move on and to continue his research. He made Pat and Annie Broeker loyal officers. Loyal officers is a term that Scientologists who did their OT levels would know what that means. That it's covered in the OT3 materials, the Wall of Fire materials and Xenu story. So they were made loyal officers. The thing that was strange to me, Janis, at the time, was that L. Ron Hubbard supposedly promoted himself to admiral. And I always thought, why would he be an admiral when he just dropped his body and was gone? There was no need for him to do that. He was always the Commodore, right?
Yes. Yeah, I thought the same thing when I saw it. And then, none of it made sense. And
it was issued to everybody in the Sea Organization along with a photo of L. Ron Hubbard. Well, anyway, shortly thereafter, it wasn't too long after that, I was working for Miscavige at the time as the corporate liaison in charge, and he and Norman were basically telling me that it was not written by Hubbard, and they suspected and they intimated that Pat Broeker had written it. The other thing too that would have been found out about too is that when Hubbard wrote an issue or something like that, he would have dictated it on a dictaphone, so there would have been evidence of it, or it would have been handwritten, or there would have been notes laying it out, because this is word for word what he wanted. And as far as I know, they were never able to find anything like that. So this issue was pulled back. It was taken back and it basically canceled. Okay. Right, Janis?
yes, and we'll go more into detail on that a little later.
Yeah. Okay. So this gave Miscavige suspicions, him and Norman Starkey. Okay. The other thing that really got them going was, rather than wanting to come back to International Base in Gilman Hot Springs and rejoin everybody, Pat Broeker and Annie, they wanted to continue the Creston Ranch where L. Ron Hubbard died, where Pat Broeker was raising show horses. He was raising horses and taking them to horse shows. He had more interest in doing that than being involved in running Scientology. And this was obviously a huge outpoint for Miscavige and for the rest of us when we found this out, because there was no reason to continue to do that. He also claimed he was going to continue L. Ron Hubbard's research. All right. They also had control of all of L. Ron Hubbard's auditing and research folders. Okay. So they decided they were going to continue to live at the ranch. And I was made to get staff. We sent up about a dozen staff, maybe close to 20. We just interviewed Jim Mortland, who was one of the staff that we sent up there. We just interviewed him last week, and he had been set up there. And he told us about the fact that, Miscavige and Norman told him one thing, and then Annie, when he got up there, she wanted to know what Miscavige and Norman said, and she told them something else. So there was a rift building right then and there, right, Janis?
Oh, yeah.
So this was considered crazy as well, okay? So this took about a year time, okay, after Hubbard died, right? Miscavige decided he's going to take action at this point. He doesn't trust Pat Broeker. There's other reports too from people and staff that Pat Broeker was drunk all the time and drinking. As a matter of fact, Jim Mortland told us a story about, they having to call an ambulance because Pat Broeker fell over because he was so drunk and hurt himself, So this was not, considered ethical behavior by Sea Org members. So Miscavige decides, I gotta have to take this over, and we're gonna have to get those materials. But in the meantime, I'm going to assemble a team and basically take over Scientology from Pat and Annie Broeker. Okay. And the first thing I'm going to do is he gathers a team together, right? And he gets Greg Wilhare, who worked for him at Author Services. Okay. And he's going to be the Inspector General for RTC once Miscavige takes out Pat and Annie. Okay. Mark Yeager, Miscavige decides that RTC is going to take over the function of overseeing administration and technology from international management and the senior CS Int office. So he basically says, I'm going to pull Yeager, my buddy, up to RTC. Okay. So he's made the Inspector General for Administration. That's going to be part of the team. Ray Midoff is going to be pulled up to be the Inspector General for Technology, and he's going to be the one that, put together Hubbard's research. And then Marty Rathman, who worked for Miscavige at Author Services, overseeing the legal affairs for L. Ron Hubbard and the lawsuits, he's going to be made the Inspector General for Ethics, okay, in RTC, right? So he gets this team together, right, of all these people. And basically what he has to do is, in order to get rid of Pat, there were two things they had to do. They had to get all of L. Ron Hubbard's file cabinets full of his auditing folders, because that was his research into OTs 8, 9, 10, 11, and all the way up to 15, supposedly, right? So it took a long time, but basically this is covered in Marty Rathman's book and Jesse Prince's book and Mike Rinder's book. But they got private investigators. They found out, I think from Annie, where Pat Broeker had the materials hidden. And then when Pat Broeker and David Miscavige, they flew to Washington, D.C. to meet with meet with tax attorneys that Scientology had. And when that happened, then Marty Rathman, Norman Starkey, and the private investigators, they went to the location and they gathered up all the filing cabinets of all L. Ron Hubbard's research, and they were brought to the gold base. And I got a phone call. I knew nothing of this until I got a phone call at 2 a.m. from Miscavige. I had an outside line in my house, in my birthing room. And I picked it up and he said, "Hi, sir." And he said, "Listen, I need you to go up to the safe room." There was a safe room at the Gillham Hot Springs where things could be stored. He goes, "I need you to go up there and meet Marty and Norm. And they have a bunch of filing cabinets. We're going to put them in there. And I need you to change the locks. And you're going to be the only person that knows where this stuff is and how the locks are." And he goes, "I don't care if Pat Broeker, Annie Broeker, Vicky Asnaran, anybody comes to see you to get in there, you're not to let them in." And of course I said, "Yes, sir." Right. So a big truck pulls up and they wheel in about 10 filing cabinets and put them in there. And I lock it up and change the security codes. And that's how they got supposedly the upper levels. And at that point, they could then take out Pat Broeker. Okay. And they then, the rumor is that they basically told Pat Broeker that he was gone. All the money that Hubbard had spent over the 6 years that he was gone, like buying the ranch and his mobile home and all that, that was all paid for in cash because they didn't want to be traced, right? So all this cash was couriered to Pat Broeker and then taken to Hubbard or used to pay for this stuff. And there wasn't a full accounting of it. And so Pat Broeker was accused of stealing a bunch of Hubbard's cash, buying racehorses, buying this, buying that, right? And basically Miscavige threatened to turn in Pat Broeker to the IRS and the authorities basically for theft. And because Miscavige now had control of all the materials that he needed, he was able, and also the corporations had all been set up by Miscavige and the attorneys. He was in charge of them. Pat Broeker didn't have a leg to stand on, and he basically gave in and left. And also Miscavige had also turned Annie against Pat and basically took over control. And that's how they got rid of him. Okay. So this is Miscavige. Sorry about that. I'm going to put it back up. So this was Miscavige and his team. Heber Jensen on the left, Greg Wilhare, Guillaume Moussav, there's Miscavige, Norman Starkey, and Mark Yeager. And they basically took over, and they took over the Religious Technology Center. And Miscavige made himself the chairman of the board of Religious Technology Center. Okay. He was the chairman of the board of Author Services when Hubbard died. It was not intended for him to be in charge of Religious Technology Center, as I mentioned before. Well, he took it over. All right. And he came in on mission with Greg Wilhare, Marty, and Norman. And they basically kicked out a bunch of people that were loyalists. They got Vicky Asnaran and Jesse Prince. They sent them to the RPF. Vicky eventually blew and left the Sea Org with her husband. Jesse Prince, when he was confronted and was the day that they came in and took over, Jesse was so upset he went to his room and he got a bunch of guns, and he covers this in his book. And he went into DM's office and had guns and basically said, "Okay, who's taking over now?" And he was really upset because he had been close with Miscavige, and basically he was just siding with Pat and Annie. That's why Miscavige was getting rid of him. Anyway, Miscavige had to cool Jesse down, and then they went and they met over at the swimming pool area, calmed him down, and got Jesse to go to the rehabilitation project force. All right. I was then charged with creating the organization board for Religious Technology Center, where it was made admin, tech, and ethics. And that's where we had the Inspector General for Administration and for tech and for ethics. And I did the whole organizational board, the statistics, the products, and everything. I designed and I did all that based on talking to Miscavige and how he wanted it. So that was my duty to do that. And basically, we were all incorporated into RTC. And from then on, Miscavige and his, started taking over. This is him at St. Hill with Norman and all the people there when the new castle was opened up, right? And then who guarantees the future of Scientology? We do. Norman Starkey, Mark Yeager, and David Miscavige. And of course, now you're left with David Miscavige by himself. These other executives are nowhere to be seen. And he runs Scientology from events, basically, and really opening up ideal morgues, that are empty, and running the whole place through donations, right? Not the expansion of Scientology, delivering services or anything like that. So that is the story through photographs, Janis. And I opening the floor to discussion so you can add your 2 cents and we can discuss it.
You did a good job, Mark. Well done. Yeah, so
it's hard to do. It's hard to do because there's a lot more involved detail wise, but I'm trying to keep it simple for our viewers so that they can understand what's going on.
Yeah, no, and I think you did a good job. You put it all together in a nice sequence and showed how it ended up and how Miscavige was not the chosen one. And I keep hearing that Hubbard never left, a structure or who was to be in charge, or that it was Miscavige. He did, and that is what Mark already explained with the executive director and then the breakdown of the other corporations that were to oversee, but they weren't to run and manage and control Scientology. That was the executive director international. And right, interestingly enough, even when that was first set up, Miscavige kept ordering into the ED Int and telling him what to do, just like the whole order on no children in the Sea Org anymore, no more pregnancies or children. And that came out in Guillaume Reserve's name. He didn't like that. He disagreed with it, but it came out in his name under the demand of David Miscavige.
No, you're absolutely right. I forgot about that. You're right. He didn't want to have anything put out in his name, so he put out in the Executive Director International. Now, here's the other thing, too. When Miscavige took over RTC as chairman of the board, he basically bypassed everybody all the time. Like you said, he would cross-order. He'd cross-order the Executive Director International, the WDC chairman. He would go in there and not just him, but, other people like Marty and Mark Yeager and Ray, they would go in and basically order what they wanted to have done. And they would never let the people who are supposed to do the jobs do their jobs, right?
Correct. Yes, they did. Everything was a cross order at that point, and you always knew where it came from. And I remember, here's a perfect example of how he would hide behind other people. I had a leave of absence approved, and I was down in Australia after having just completed a mission to management. And when you do a mission to management, you wait for 6 weeks of statistics to determine if it was successful or not. Well, it was 1 week and I was in Australia, and Miscavige gets a bee in his bonnet, and my bosses are telling me I need to come back. I'm like, I just got to Australia. I'm not coming back. I've got 3 more weeks of my leave. And they were calling my grandmother, who is 92 years old. They were harassing me. And then I'm like, and it was in Janadir's name or Mark Imber's name. So I finally sent a telex. I went, this is coming from Miscavige. So I sent a telex to Dave Miscavige. And I told him, I said, these people are telling me to come back for a ComEv based off of me being out of the orb for 1 week, not 6 weeks. And I'm not coming back until I have my leave because I had to pay for this myself. And Miscavige approves my petition. Oh, who are these people? They shouldn't be issuing orders like that. You're entitled to your leave of absence. But I knew it was coming from him. And I put him in a position where he couldn't blame anyone else if he denied me. But that's how he operated. He operated through other people, and then he would come out as the savior and get mad at those people who had followed his orders, but he saved you because he's now putting policy in when you demand it.
Right, exactly right. Same thing happened with me on several occasions. But, we started to notice that he wasn't playing by the same rules and the policies of L. Ron Hubbard in terms of running Scientology. And, he started to get abusive. It took him a while, and it actually happened after we left in 1990 because we'd had enough when he, started demeaning staff in front of the whole base, when he started physically attacking like me and other people. And, we decided that we had enough, and we could see the writing on the wall. Same thing like you said, Janis, I had all of my certificates were canceled by the RTC ethics off MAA, Master at Arms, but I knew it came from Miscavige. And I sent up a petition basically saying, hey, this is off policy. It can't be done without a committee of evidence. I sent it up to Ray Midoff, who was, over tech and Emin or whatever, and it got denied. And I went, okay, they're not playing by the Hubbard rules the way they're supposed to. And then we shortly left thereafter. And then the other thing, taking it further from that point, Miscavige basically played ball, from what I can tell, until he got the IRS tax exemption in 93. Because when we left, he sicked private investigators on us to keep an eye on us and keep your sister Terry out of the United States, because he was afraid that, Terry and myself and others, that we would tell the IRS that he was running everything when he was denying that he was running everything, and he was running everything, right? But then once he got that tax exempt status, right, then he started to take over, and he knew he could do things the way he wanted to do. There was no check and balance after they had the tax exemption, and the donations then started up. He then could change there's typographical errors in the original books. Oh, the golden age of tech, let's redefine what a floating needle is. And all of a sudden, technical delivery has crashed, and people are not getting the same wins that they were getting before. Why? Because nobody could challenge him. And we always get asked, well, why didn't anybody challenge him? Okay, there's two factors. Number one is the people that are in Scientology in the Sea organization, they're afraid of him. Okay, he runs Scientology by fear. I'm talking about towards the staff members. But even the public, like Leah Remini and some of the other public, on the outside, he'd be, just like you said, Janis, he'd be so nice and cordial and this and that. And then after they left, he'd be under his breath, that MFer and blah, blah, blah. And, he would he was two-faced, beyond two-faced.
Yeah.
And so you go ahead, Janis.
No, I have a perfect example of that. When I was on the mission to pull off the original maiden voyage of the Freewinds, I was in charge of it, and I had like 12 missionaries underneath me handling different areas so that we were able to get everything done in time and launch and have a successful maiden voyage, which we did. But when Miscavige showed up with Norman Starkey and Mark Yeager, I was surprised because I'd not really been out in the field with them. And here I was, the missionary in charge, and I'm watching them hobnobbing with the public. And I'm like, oh my God, they are validating and think that the public are higher and better than Sea Org members who Miscavige treats like crap. And that was an eye-opener for me when I saw that, because I'd been, in management for years and not been out and around, public and so forth, until here I was on the ship and seeing the public being treated better than people who have dedicated their lives. And so that's where I was like, something's off here. But that's what you're just saying there.
Yeah. And then the other reason why that people don't challenge him is because he's got all of the attorneys in his back pocket. They pay them millions of dollars. Okay. He's got Monique Yingling on retainer for years. Okay. He's got all these attorneys on retainer, and he follows the Hubbard policy, which is that don't let the attorneys tell you what to do. You tell the attorneys what you want them to do and have them figure out how to do it. And that's basically what he does. So all the corporations, Janis, I know I was on corporate, they did corporations for all the different little organizations in church. And I was a member of the corporation. But when you become a member of the corporation, you sign a resignation letter that's undated, that they keep in a safe, so that if you ever leave or get removed or whatever, they just date the resignation and then they appoint somebody else. Okay. So Miscavige controls all of the boards of directors, right? The third thing that he controls is the Church of Spiritual Technology. If you remember, the top thing that I mentioned about the ones who actually got Hubbard's money and actually control the trademarks and the copyrights is the Church of Spiritual Technology. Well, there's a CO of the Church of Spiritual Technology. Well, Miscavige always made sure that whoever was in that position was his puppet. Okay, and even though I think legally I'm not as up to snuff on the establishment of CST, but my understanding is that they can't pull the trademarks from RTC and Scientology because they own them, right? And Miscavige couldn't say boo. Miscavige couldn't say boo. But guess what? If he's got the CO or whoever's in charge intimidated, right, they're not going to ever do that, So that's the one way that at the time when we were there, I don't know, he may have changed it by now, but that was the one way that, they could have gone, hey, Miscavige, we're taking the trademarks and stuff, and you can't do that anymore until you leave. But, that's never happened. And he just intimidates everybody. So anyway, that's why. The other thing I wanted to mention, Janis, too, let's go into a little bit more detail about Pat and Annie Broeker, okay? Because a lot of people think they were supposed to be in charge. But talk about Pat, okay? Some of the things that you heard, and I know you talked to Annie after she came back to the Gold Base, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was her life like up there, and why wasn't she a good choice to carry on running Scientology?
Well, let me give a little history here, and that is Pat was after he was in finances on the ship, he was Sea Org Reserves in charge, and later on he managed to become one of the public relations people for Hubbard, and this was through his marriage to Trudy, who was a messenger. And when we moved to Clearwater, Pat and Trudy were on a project setting up all the LRH's spaces in the Fort Harrison and getting anything that Hubbard needed at that time. Then Pat and Trudy broke up, and Pat ended up at La Quinta at Rifle, what was called Special Unit or Over the Rainbow or Winter Headquarters. They had different names for it. And while he was there, he became a messenger. And when the FBI raided, he was with Claire and Dee Dee and took off with Hubbard as a male to be an escort. And they all they drove up to Sparks, Nevada, and that's where they lived for several months. And Pat was like the male, and Claire and Dee Dee had never lived out in the real world or anything like that. But Pat had a little more experience than they did. So Pat became a solid messenger at that point, having been living with LRH, with Dee Dee and Claire, just the four of them for so long. And then when Hubbard was at what we called X, which was an apartment building in Hemet, just 15 minutes away from the Gold Base, Pat, by this time, had married Annie. So we had two messengers married to each other, living at X, where Hubbard was, and all the other messengers kind of went on rotation. We'd go out for a week, and then in replacement come out a week later, where Pat and Annie stayed at X the whole time. And when Kimmer and Michael Douglas blew, normally it was Kim and Michael who went with Hubbard to Washington, D.C. or to X and that type of thing. They blew. So
Janet, explain who Kim and Mike Douglas were.
Mike Douglas handled all of LRH's external communications and later took over his investments. And Kimma was in charge of Hubbard's household unit and was his steward and made sure his laundry was done, that his food was cooked. She also was like a nurse, and if he needed allergy shots, she gave them to him, that type of thing. So after they blew, us messengers were like, okay, if Hubbard has to leave again, who's going with him? We wanted to have that worked out. So I'm sitting there kind of going, you don't see me, I'm not here. I want to have a life, because whoever goes, they're not going to have a life. And it ended up because Pat and Annie were married, they were selected to go with him. Rather than two girls, there weren't any guys who were experienced enough to deal with Hubbard and know everything. They were kind of more of a junior status. So Annie was a senior messenger, having been an original messenger with myself and Claire and my sister since 1968. So she'd had a long experience with him. And also Hubbard trusted Pat. Pat was his public relations when his father died. Pat is who LRH sent out to handle all his personal affairs for his father and handle where the different belongings go and that type of thing. So the logical choice was a married couple who could go with Hubbard then being the elderly father of Annie and Pat being her husband or the son-in-law. So that's how that was decided. It wasn't decided that because they're the best messengers, that's not true. And Annie already had a history of failing as the CO, the commanding officer of the messenger orgs, where she would let investigations that Hubbard had ordered just pile up on her desk rather than get them forwarded to him, so that he's then, hey, where's this investigation I ordered weeks ago? Well, there it was piled up on Annie's desk with a whole bunch of other stuff he was looking for. So she wasn't selected because of her administrative skills. And so when time came, they're the ones who went with them. And then, so you're talking Pat and Annie were with him from 1980, early 80 until early 86 when he passed away. That's a good 6 years where you're living a secluded life. Pat's the only person who's gotten out and talked to anyone by meeting up with Miscavige and gallivanting around Las Vegas. Otherwise, there really wasn't much life. Oh, Pat did go to horse races and go buy and sell horses and so forth. And Annie did a few things, but she was the one that was always with Hubbard because you couldn't leave him alone. And so when he had dictation or administrative stuff, Annie's the one who took the dictation, made the notes. She put the comm packages together, the mail packages together. And Pat had actually, by the time Hubbard passed away, the reason I believe Pat was removed as the trustee and replaced by Norman in that last-minute will was because Hubbard was really upset with Pat, and we'd come to find out had actually kicked him out of Creston because he hadn't gotten the all clear so Hubbard could go back to Gold Base to live in his house there and be around people. Instead, here they were, Pat and Annie and Hubbard and Sarge, who mostly looked after the animals and the property. But so Annie, to me, she lived in seclusion, and suddenly she's in charge of this whole big operation, but she's not on anything legally because she had to be kept at a distance, and she's in total overwhelm and doesn't even know how to hang out with people anymore. She slowly had Vicky coming up, and Vicky would hang out with her, but she didn't come back and embrace the operation and show that she was in charge. She used Vicky to do that.
Right. And so that disconnection, I'm sure she was, dealing with Hubbard by herself. Well, I mean, she probably cooked his meals. I mean, she probably did everything for him for 6 years. Plus they were on the move for the first part, they didn't buy Creston right away. They were in that Bluebird mobile home driving, and I think Pat was driving one, and then Annie followed in an RV where Pat and Annie would stay. And while he was on the road, he was writing Battlefield Earth, and then he wrote that 10 episode Mission Earth. So she was always busy dealing with his crap, right? Sorry.
Sorry about that, everyone.
Elizabeth. But anyway, so she didn't know everything that was going on in Scientology. So she was actually very weak. And you can imagine it probably was devastating dealing with Hubbard before he died and all that. So Miscavige took advantage of that and basically got her to, he pushed her buttons basically and got her to agree to come back to the Gold Base and go into the RPF. And then from that point forward, for a long time, she was basically like a hands-off person. You wouldn't talk to her. I mean, she probably talked to you, right? Your old friends, but the rest of the base left her alone. She worked in the dark room in L. Ron Hubbard's dark room, developing film.
Yeah. Well, her first Christmas off the RPF, I asked her, I said, hey, I'm going to go Christmas shopping in Palm Springs. You want to come with me? And I thought, this is a way we could probably get back in touch with each other and rebuild our friendship, because she was now just working in F&E and nobody knew who she was. She was just lonely and no friends. So we would go shopping together for Christmas, and she's buying Miscavige a Christmas gift. She's got no money. She's been in the RPF. She's got no money, and she's trying to figure out what to get him. And I'm kind of like, well, why are you getting Dave a Christmas present? You don't have any money. Look how he's treated you is what I'm thinking. And she's telling me how wonderful he is. And I'm like, oh my God, she's totally brainwashed. And this is while I was in, because I could see things going on. And Annie, when Hubbard died, he had given her a car during the 6 years they were there. He'd given her a fur coat. He'd given her jewelry. He had treated her well with gifts and stuff, at Christmas and birthdays. I don't know, Pat probably went out and bought it with Hubbard's money, but they were gifts from Hubbard for her. And when she got busted to the RPF, Lovey, Maria Starkey, Norman Starkey's wife.
Lovey.
Norman always called her Lovey, and so we always called her Lovey. Anyway,
that's like Mrs. Howell on the Gilligan's Island. Sorry, you always called her Lovey. Go ahead.
Anyway, so Maria Starkey, one of her job assignments was to get Annie's car sold, get her coat sold, get her jewelry sold. And Annie was kind of waiting for Maria to get this stuff sold so that she'd have some money, because she hardly made anything on the RPF. And she obviously didn't save. She was terrible at saving. So here she was with nothing and trying to buy this guy who dragged her down in the world instead of supporting her and helping her, as per Hubbard's wishes. She's trying to buy him a gift. So.
Yeah. And then how about Pat? Now, Pat, like Jim Mortland told us, and, Miscavige told me at the time, all the staff up there at Creston Ranch, they're all drunk and drinking all the time and all that. And when we talked to Jim Mortland the other day, he said Pat would get drunk and all that. But the other thing he did too, he was out there. He would dealing with crystals and all sorts of stuff. He was out there. He wasn't fully being a Scientologist and doing Scientology, right? So, leaving Scientology in his hands was not going to be a good decision either, because he had a few screws loose himself. And of course, but Miscavige was afraid of him, so that when he did get rid of him, they put 2 private investigators on him full time for 25, 30 years, paying them millions of dollars to follow Pat as he moved around the world. He wanted to be a veterinarian, and he moved to Europe for a time. And these former police officer, private investigators, were paid to go to Europe and get close to Pat again and keep track of him. Why? Because Miscavige knew that Pat had a lot of information about Miscavige and how they took over. And basically, DM turned on Pat Broeker as well and got rid of him. So that earlier conspiracy, Miscavige chose another side and got rid of Pat, and probably rightfully so if you think about it. But Miscavige shouldn't have been in charge. That's all.
Right, but Pat was not left in charge. Annie was the one left in charge, and that is where she should have been nurtured and helped to move back down and do what she was supposed to do. Obviously, Hubbard felt she could do it, but she herself didn't feel she could do it and needed her confidence built up, going from living with two people, because Pat had been kicked out months before. He wasn't allowed. He would show up at Creston when Hubbard was sleeping, so he wouldn't get yelled at or asked what's happening on the all clear. And even Annie got to a point she was fed up with Hubbard. Sergeant told me how Annie storms in. I'm so sick of that old man, because he was so grumpy. And that's what I didn't like when I was around him. He was so grumpy so many times. It became exhausting to try and calm him down and, report so that it wouldn't upset him and then get people in trouble.
Yep. Anyway, so that's why Pat and Annie didn't end up being in charge, okay? And that really wasn't the ultimate plan anyway. Like I said, when we put out the chart, that's the way it was supposed to be, okay? Now, would Scientology have been successful if they'd done that? Who knows? We have no idea of knowing. And whether or not it was a good idea to do that or not, who knows? But that's what the plan was. It wasn't like David Miscavige was L. Ron Hubbard's friend and he was anointed and he spent more time with Hubbard than anybody else. It was all crap, okay? The person who spent more time with him than anybody else was Annie Broeker, Annie Rush, Annie Tidman, because she started at the age of 12, 13 years old. And she was with him for 6 years, every day of his life until the day he died. He more so than his own family, And then the way that Miscavige treated L. Ron Hubbard's family, and I think Hubbard also had some doing in that too, was despicable. I mean, who makes millions and millions of dollars and then gives their family a pittance? And Miscavige to this day still tries to keep them under control and not speak out, and it's really bizarre. And you have any other comment on it, Janis?
Not right now. I'll probably come up with something.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and do questions. We're going to go to the questions and answers from y'all. I know you've already started a bunch of them. Listen, everybody, if you're interested in asking a question about this or anything else, please write the word question in the chat, all right, and then write your question. We appreciate super stickers and super chats. Any donation to our channel, we appreciate. We put it to good use, and we really appreciate it if you do contribute. And then, like I said before, if you want to become a member of our channel, subscribe. We want you to subscribe. But if you want to, add a little bit more, and you want to be a member and get more access to us one-on-one, all you got to do is hit that join button on our YouTube page. We've added quite a few members in the last week and a half, and we really appreciate you all. And you're going to be getting perks. We're going to be the Peeling Masters. We're going to be doing one-on-ones with you starting up here in the next week or so. And that's why we need your contact information. We need to know how we could email you and set up a time so we can do some one-on-one chats with you. So anyway, if you want to become a member, hit that join button. And of course, we appreciate everybody subscribing as well. We went over 7,000 subscribers this week, right, Janis?
Yes, we did, before 2:00 Thursday.
And we would like to get over 8, 9, 10,000. Okay. So anyway, Janis, I'm going to go ahead and start with the questions. Okay.
All righty.
All right. Well, we're starting off with a super sticker from Little Old Lady. Thank you so much for your support, Little Old Lady. We really appreciate that. And here's Elizabeth. Do you want to introduce her to everybody?
Not yet.
Do you want to introduce Elizabeth or no?
Oh, yeah. Elizabeth, come here and I'll introduce you. Come and say hello. You gardening?
Yeah.
This is, all right.
She just took off again.
Well,
That's your granddaughter.
Yeah, that's my 3.5-year-old granddaughter. She came in earlier to tell me the dogs had gone potty in the backyard and it needed to be picked up.
Got it.
Yeah, she's my assistant for that.
That's right.
She tells me and I pick it up.
Okay, we've got another this is a super chat from Betsy Crutcher. Why did WDC have to be secret? Thank you, Betsy, for that super chat. Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah. Hubbard he just felt that if it was unknown, there wouldn't be conflict and people would just follow what they're saying and be anonymous.
Yeah, and I would think too, like people wouldn't be able to know what they were dealing with. So if they had a personal relationship, they couldn't go around them and get them to do favors for them too. You know what I mean? Thank you very much for that, Betsy. Okay, we've got Mr. Crow has a question. Do you think Pat Broeker had any of the documents that he claimed would be OT 9 and 10 that was his job to compile, or do you think he was bluffing? Also, Janis, did you get my email? Cheers from Mr. Crow. Yes, he's a member. He's a peeling master. We did get his email, right, Janis?
I think I got it. I don't know.
Yeah, you sent it. He's one of the ones who you asked me about. Is he a member? For a book?
Okay, then yes.
Anyway, do you want to answer the question?
I got a little distracted there. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
He did have documents. He did have L. Ron Hubbard's folders. He had his folders and documents. But that's what I was saying in the story, that once Miscavige got control of all those, Pat had nothing.
Yeah, Pat had nothing, and they didn't take any information from Pat. And I know when they worked on the OT8, Ray Midoff was a nervous wreck doing that, because he said to me, I just had to put this together from notes. There was nothing laying it out. I had to just kind of compile it and figure out what goes where in what sequence. And that's why I believe they had to redo it, is because Ray didn't know what he was doing and nor what he was looking at, because Hubbard hadn't written it up, and they just had to kind of wing it and come up with something fast.
I completely agree with you, Janis. Those files were basically L. Ron Hubbard's auditing sessions, right?
Yes.
There wasn't like, do this, then do this, then do this. They basically had to go through the stuff and piece it together, and they put out OTA, and then they ended up having to put it out again because basically, they thought, people were not doing well on it, and that's why there's no OT 9, 10, 11, and 12. If they're going to have OT 9, 10, 11, and 12 people, it's going to be David Miscavige's creation. Okay, it's not going to be something from L. Ron Hubbard. It's going to be his, and I don't think you'll ever see it, because I don't think it ever existed. Thank you for that question, Mr. Crow. All right, we'll go to the next question here from, sorry, I did that one already. Moonage Daydream. Question: do Sea Org execs get paid the standard Sea Org wage, or are there pay improvements? Some of us, like in our position, me more so than you, Janis, but if you were an executive working for for David Miscavige, we got bonuses on top of our basic pay, and there were monthly bonuses, and they were quite generous, considering the fact that all of our expenses were paid for, our food, lodging, and all that stuff. How about you, Janis?
I got standard pay, and then when the international stats were in affluence, we managed to get bonuses if we were fully hatted. But RTC, under the direction of Vicky Asnaran, changed the fully hatted status to where you need to get the false purpose rundown to be fully hatted, and therefore you no longer qualified to get bonuses. And I had a big issue with that and made a racket about it. And that actually was a time when Vicky and Annie sided together against Pat and DM, who sided together, and Pat and DM supported me and Jaeger, where Annie and VA were coming after us. And I pointed out, and Pat and Dave were supported me, where I said, look, Vicky's order crashed the international stats. When people stopped getting bonuses for not being fully hatted anymore, the international stats started crashing. And it was all confirmed, and yes, that I was right. Okay.
Thanks very much for that question. We've got a super chat. Thank you very much, Rusty. What happened to Dee Dee and then Gail? That's Dee Dee Riesdorf and her sister Gail.
What happened to them is, Dee Dee got removed as the commanding officer by Hubbard based off reports from Miscavige, which Dee Dee always thought it was her talking to Omar Garrison and telling him some things for the LRH biography. But why I had heard Dee Dee was removed was because when the buy now was happening, the pricing kept increasing at the end of every month. And this was happening the whole time Hubbard was gone. And Dee Dee was, as the commanding officer in charge of international Scientology, was like, we can't keep doing this. People can't afford it. So she consulted Mary Sue on it. And therefore, she was an ally of Mary Sue's when that all went down. And so Dee Dee was removed for undoing that LRH order on the buy now.
Yeah, that's what I'd heard too.
LRH's orders. And then Gail took over, and Gail's job, after being 3 months on the job, she was to get reports up to Hubbard on where every sector of Scientology stood. So everyone did up reports, and DM was involved in these reports, and so was Yeager. And somehow LRH looked at these reports and thought they were a bunch of fluff and had Gail removed. Meanwhile, DM is the one reporting to Patton, being the person, let me save the day. And so he manages to now get rid of Gail, and then Lois goes because she's connected through marriage to Gail and Dee Dee. And then they all get sent to Clearwater as swampers, just removed of everything that they had done, and sent to Clearwater as swampers. And then from there, they were like, this is ridiculous, and routed out.
Their whole family was sent to Clearwater, including their parents. Their parents
had already been kicked out.
But I'm just saying, they all were sent to Clearwater. I mean, I remember I was there when they arrived. You know, they ended up doing maids work and stuff in Clearwater before they left. It was crazy, you know.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Their husbands were sent, everybody.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was a total witch hunt.
Yep.
So anyway, they finally from there just all routed out and ended up in San Diego, and they got good lives and they're happy.
Yep.
They're happy to be gone from that madness.
That's right. Okay, we got another super. This is a super sticker from Free Xenu Project. Thank you very much, Free Xenu Project. Here's a question from Katrina Jones. Is Pat and Annie Broeker still alive?
Pat, I assume he is still alive. Annie passed away in 2012, I believe it was. And sadly, her family were not informed. I know one of the sisters kept calling and asking for Annie and being told, oh, they'd given her the message, or they'll get a message to her. Meanwhile, she was dead. And the sister is not being told this. And then it wasn't until I think Jeffrey Augustine or someone found a death certificate on her. I then called the sisters, and I am the one who broke the news to the family that their sister had passed away a year before. And no one had told them, and none of her belongings were sent to the family. Nothing. It was just very rude. Yes.
Absolutely. Okay. Next question from Ryan Maharaj. A question for Janis. If you were chosen to help take care of Hubbard instead, do you think you might have been able to control Hubbard and the situation in the end and make sure DM couldn't take over?
You know, I can't guarantee anything.
You're just glad you weren't chosen.
Anything, but I just know I didn't want to go with Hubbard because I knew I wouldn't have a life if I went, and that proved true with Pat and Annie. They didn't have a life. Well, Pat managed to have a life, but Annie didn't.
Yeah, and then were you married to Paul at the time when Hubbard took off yet, or no?
No.
Okay,
no,
so if you had gone, you and Paul would have never really happened. You'd have no kids. You know
That's
what I mean?
right.
You've got your great kids. I mean, think about how much it would have changed if you had been the one chosen to go, you know?
Right. Well, that's
Crazy.
why I just wanted to be a flower on the wall.
Thanks very much for that question, Ryan. Next question, Sea Org Tech Discussions. Question, Mark Fisher. Please clarify the correct name was Zemu. LRH never called him Xenu in the original tape assists. You know, I don't know that tape. The only reason I call him Xenu is because everybody else calls him that. I actually don't know. Do you know, Janis?
No, I've seen it both ways, and who cares? That's not even what Scientology was about. It's
part of the story, but anyway, I don't actually know how it was. I don't remember. That was a long time ago for us. Thank you, though, Sea Org Tech Discussions. Appreciate your question. Preacher 1138, did Miscavige actually try to get Hubbard's name cleared, or was the task impossible anyway? They were working on it. They had attorneys trying to get the IRS case dismissed and all the different lawsuits settled and gotten rid of. But, in actuality, they should have settled a bunch of the suits and all that. They would have gone away. They just Miscavige was always, we got to fight. We're going to fight. We're going to fight. And then when they lost several, or they looked like they were going to lose, they ended up settling. And they end up settling most lawsuits. They haven't gone to court in years, right, Janis?
Yeah, and it was actually Mary Sue who, even after they had denigrated her, she had still said, to handle these lawsuits, you need to just settle and make them go away so they're gone and you can get your all clear. But no, DM had to keep fighting.
Yeah, absolutely. No, if they'd settled most of the lawsuits, Hubbard probably could have come out at a certain point,
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for that question. Next question is Parallel Jen. What the hell is a birthing room? Janis?
That was you that said that. You were talking about, I guess you were talking about the upper villas, and you said you went up to the safe room by the birthing rooms or something like that.
I don't know, but explain. You were on the ship, not me, but explain what a birthing room is.
So birthing is a ship term for where the crew slept, the crew birthing. And that has carried on through the Sea Org, even on land, where the crew birthing is where the crew live, or the crew quarters is still called birthing.
Yeah. Thanks for that question, Parallel Jen. I hope that clears it up for you. Next question, Dastardly Saboteur, another member of ours. Thank you. Is Janis wearing an onion necklace today?
Yes, I am.
How about the earrings? Are they onion earrings too?
No, these are flowers to match my dress. These are Hawaiian flowers.
That's right. Oh, by the way, I wanted to let everybody know, Saturday, we are doing a live stream at 5 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Pacific. It's Sea Org Day on Saturday. It's August 12th, and that's Sea Org Day. And we got a special live stream because we're going to have Gary Jackson Moorhead, Amy Scobie, and Matt Pesh. They're all going to be guests of ours. So you're going to want to watch that. We're going to be telling funny stories about Sea Org days in the past and just reminiscing. And it should be fun because they're all fun people. Jackson, Amy, Matt, Janis, and yours truly. So join us on Saturday. It'll be a great live stream, everybody. We'll go to our next question. Japan of Green Gables. Question, does Marty have any redeeming qualities? And if so, what are they? Even before he flipped, he doesn't seem very nice. My interactions with him were never personal until he got out, and then, I interacted with him, on the Truth Rundown articles that we did. And I actually went to visit, we had like a gathering of everybody in Texas at one point, and he seemed fine. But, he basically, he was a henchman, there's no other way to describe that. And he was David Miscavige's pit bull. I mean, that's what it was. What about you, Janis?
Well, before he became David Miscavige's pit bull, he was in external comm, LRH was external comm, handling telexes and mail and so forth. And LRH found out that he had some sort of training. And so he had Marty assigned to every day do a whole exercise program with the messengers. So every day at 1 o'clock, we all had to muster up, and Marty led us all in exercises so that we didn't get flat asses from being at a desk all the time, or wide asses. When I first met Paul, I was at Hammett Gold, and Paul was in Clearwater, and we were writing back and forth. But I guess Marty didn't know that. And one day when he was in external comm, one day he shows up at my office, knocks on the door, and I open it. and he's standing there with a rose for me. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I have someone I'm interested in already. So, I mean, I was always good friends with Marty.
That's good. Okay, thanks for that question. Next question, Danielle Chamberlain, another member of our channel. Question, did Pat Broeker have to sign a confidentiality agreement, as he's never said anything since has he? No, he hasn't, but I don't know if he had to sign one, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I personally think they probably, paid him off to some degree and probably got a confidentiality agreement, but I have no proof of that. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, that's my opinion. It probably happened because they wouldn't just let him go without signing something. They'd figure out how to keep him under control so he doesn't blab about how DM did the takeover.
Yeah. Next question, Calico26. Did Shelley have any role in Dave's takeover? Yes, she was his assistant from the time that she started, like we said, in 1982. And, when there was that car accident, she became Miscavige's personal, his communicator assistant. She called herself the assistant, but she basically was his communicator. Yeah. And so she was involved with a lot of the stuff, because she was supporting Dave. And I don't think she was involved in any of the planning. She just basically did whatever.
Right. Whatever he told her to do, she just followed it and did it.
Yeah. Thanks for that question. Next question, Dashley Saboteur, another member of our channel. Question, have you reached out to see if Jesse Prince would come on and do an episode with you?
We'll have to see.
Okay.
I mean, there's so many people that I've got to reach out to and ask, and and Jesse is on my list to reach out to and see if he'll do it. But we'll see. A lot of people, you got to remember, also have new lives. They're tired of bashing over the same stories, so they want to just move on. So we're just taking a stride, and we got enough people banging on our door to.
Yeah, we got plenty of material. Thanks very much for that question. Next question, Free Xeno Project question. Do you think he got abusive because he didn't feel people showed him the same respect they did Hubbard? Or was it more that these people knew he shouldn't have been in power he did? Talking about David Miscavige. I just think he was abusive. He's a narcissist. I mean, he basically, he wanted to be in charge, and he took control, and he learned that he could rule by fear, I don't know if he learned that from Hubbard. He may have. I don't know. What do you think, Janis?
Well, Hubbard didn't do half the stuff DM did. I mean, Hubbard did some stuff, but DM's was way worse and more often. DM had, he felt power could be assumed, and that's how he took over, was assuming the power and then just stepping on everyone all the way up.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much for that. We've got a super chat, Hot Cross Scones. Hi from Brisbane. What does it mean to be fully hatted? Good day, right, Janis?
Yep. G'day.
What does it mean to be fully hatted? What does it mean to be fully hatted, Janis?
Oh, okay. What that means is you have all the policies that Hubbard has written on what your job duties consist of. And you have to go study those, and you have to get checked out on them, meaning someone will cross-question you. And then you have to also do demonstrations with clay or plasticine, an Australian term, and show that you have knowledge on how to do your job. And then in addition to doing that, they added the requirement of having to get audited on the false purpose rundown. And then people were no longer considered fully hatted and therefore qualified to get a bonus, because people had to scramble to try and find an auditor to audit them on the false purpose rundown to get that completed to be fully hatted again. And when you're fully hatted, you've got job security, as long as your stats keep going up. Yeah. So that's what that is.
Okay, great. Thanks for the question. Next, we got another super chat. Rusty, thank you for the super chat, Rusty. Do you recall an announcement about 1980 that we were going to clear the planet in 1 year? Never understood that. The emperor had no clothes. Wasn't that the OODS item that Diana Hubbard was putting into the OODS that we were going to clear it in a year?
I don't know. That was in
No, I
Clearwater?
remember there was a count. Yeah, there was a countdown in the daily OODS. How many days until we were going to clear?
Well, that was in Clearwater. I wasn't there, but I do know in 78, I believe it was, that is when we were told we had 5 years to clear the planet because the Miscavians were going to be coming and invading within 5 years.
Oh. I think what was happening, the countdown was happening. Diana Hubbard, she was CS6 at the time, and I think she was made to take it out because they knew they weren't going to achieve that. I got to let my dog out. 1 second. Come on, Misha. Here you go. You want to go outside?
Well, hello, everybody. My doggies are fast asleep behind me. They finally calmed down.
Okay, I'm back. Hey, we got a super chat from Denver Stevo, another member of our channel. Thank you, Denver Stevo. That's very generous. Here's a small contribution to the Mark's Hawaiian shirts and my copy of Janis's second book, Funds. Love you both, and Osa smells like poo. Thank you very much, Denver Stevo. Yeah, I'm going to be adding some more Hawaiian shirts here shortly. I've got quite a few already, but yeah, it's time to add some more. And we really appreciate your support, Denver Stevo. So thank you very much. And another super chat here from Love It. Just because. Love you too. Well, thank you so much. Love it. We appreciate that too. And we really appreciate all that. Okay. So let me go to the next question here. We've got Mary Klein. This is one of the few YouTube channels I've ever joined with a paid subscription of sorts, and it's totally worth it. Mary, thank you so much for being a member. And if anybody else is interested, please do join us. You hit that join button, and you get some extra benefits. If you become a Peeling Master, you get a free autographed copy of Janis's book. We've got other perks as well and other connections. So.
But anyone can subscribe for free and just watch all of our shows and ask questions, and we try to answer every question. You don't have to pay for questions.
Yeah.
We try and get to every question just because that's our duty, a responsibility for putting on this show.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, we'll go to the next one. Blow drill. Was this right after the loyal officer issue, meaning the takeover? Yes, it was after the loyal officer issue. Next question is from Manaj Daydream. Question: were all the members of DM's takeover team junior to him when he promoted them into the positions? If not, how did he assume the required level of authority? Was it a coup conspiracy? They were all junior to him. He was basically the one, dictating things. The only people who were not junior to him were Vicky Asnaran and Jesse Prince in the Religious Technology Center. And they obviously ended up on the other side with Pat and Annie and were taken out. But all the other ones, Mark Yeager, Ray Midoff, Greg Wilhare, and Marty, they were all under DM's control. So that was a good question. Thank you so much, Blood Drill. Next question is from Life in Sync. Well done, you two, for this explanation on the major third dynamic engram. Really appreciate what you do. It's appreciated. Well, thank you so much, Life in Sync.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we wanted to get the truth out. Well, the truth that we knew. You know what I mean? This is our story. There's details that we didn't have, and other people may have. But we're trying to share it with everybody. So we appreciate that. Okay. Let's see what else we got here. Katrina Jones question: did Janis talk to Annie Broeker again later on after she obviously, was no longer? Well,
yeah. After Annie got off the rehabilitation project force, and I'd just come back from the Free Winds. No, I hadn't gone yet. The second time, I started hanging out with Annie just because I knew she needed a friend. That nobody knew who she was, or if they did, they were afraid of her. And I'd grown up with her, so every Friday night when we had tape plays, I would go down and get her from films where she was working, and we'd go to the tape play together, and we'd just hang out. When I had to go to the Free Winds, I let her use my car and take care of my car for me while I was gone. And when I came back, she was we just hung out together. There's a whole nother story. I'm trying to get my car back, and the ethics officer telling Annie not to give me back my car keys and them taking the distributor cap off my car. So anyway.
Was that after you left, or when was that?
No, this was after I came back from being the commanding officer of the Free Winds.
Oh, I see.
Well, they cleaned up Milt Wolf. And I came back and no one knew what to do with me. And they tried to ComEv me, and then they tried to RPF me. And I'm like, well, I didn't mess up, Anyway, so that was a whole nother story.
Okay.
But Paul was in trouble.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Katrina. Next question, Diana Jean Velasilo. Question, Mark Fisher. Where do you get your Hawaiian shirts? Janis, what is your current dish best recipe for company? Osa, your job smells like poo. Okay. Thanks, Diana. Where do I get my Hawaiian shirts? I order them online. Hilo Hattie's is a famous Hawaiian shirt place in Hawaii, and I order them from there. I'm a big guy. I'm 3XL. Okay. And I only like 100% cotton shirts. That's the only thing I'll wear. I don't like rayon or anything like that. But anyway, I get them from there. I also order them online, and I've collected them over the years. Sometimes when I've gone to Hawaii, I've gone several times, I'll buy shirts and I still have them. So anyway, thanks for that question. Janis, what is your current dish best recipe for company?
I usually will do a potluck and see what everyone's bringing, and then I'll substitute something. I'll do like meatballs or lasagna or something like that in order to complement whatever everyone else is bringing. But that's my easiest thing is it's a potluck.
What is your, Janis, though, what is your specialty? Like, what is it that you like to make for people?
I don't.
You don't, huh?
I used to, but now I used to like putting steaks on or different, just different things. But now I'm kind of lazy.
You're good though at making meatballs, and also your turkeys at Thanksgiving are really good.
Yeah, I do cook a good turkey with bacon over the top.
And this is from somebody who never cooked in the Sea Org.
No, I had to learn. When I had kids, I had to suddenly learn how to cook. I remember when I was in the Sea Org, I'd go on leave to Paul's family, and I couldn't help you in the kitchen. I could maybe help wash dishes, but I didn't know how to cook. And I just kind of watched. I couldn't even talk to you about growing a tomato. I had none of that experience.
Yeah. Okay, Diane, thanks very much for that question. Next question. Naturism at Clearwater Beach. Question, do you think the Sea Organization will ever get back to sea? Best greetings from Solingen, Germany, from Jan. Well, they already are still at sea with the Free Winds, right, Janis?
Yeah, they have the Free Winds, and that's it. But as soon as that ship's gone, or as soon as Captain Napier passes away, who knows what they'll do.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. What's the next one? Question from Japan of Green Gables. Question, if Saturday is Sea Org Day, will OSA not be watching because they're off? We have no idea, whether or not they're going to get Sea Org Day off or not. We generally would get it off, but there were times when there was trouble and it would get canceled by Miscavige. But I don't ever remember it being canceled by Hubbard.
Well, we never celebrated it when Hubbard was around. Not like we did at those gold days.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. Japan of Green Gables comment. My brother-in-law's mother is famous for her meatballs, but I bet yours are better, Janis.
I don't know. You'll have to come over sometime and see.
Okay, great. Katrina Jones question. Before the Aftermath Foundation, did either Mark or Janis help anyone leave Scientology? Yes, we did. Very much so. Go ahead, Janis. You go ahead and explain.
Yeah. Before the Aftermath Foundation, we kind of were it. After I left, I went to my brother, of course, and my sister had already left before me, and she was in Florida, so she came out to California, and we're like, what are we going to do? And then I heard that Mark had left. So I called his in-laws in San Diego and got a hold of him. And he came and joined us. And that's when we kind of were like, what are we going to do? And Mark checked out San Diego, and we got a call from someone in Colorado who said, hey, I'm going to set up a mortgage company in Las Vegas, Boomtown, USA. I'll teach you the business. So we all moved to Vegas, 5 of us living in a little 2-bedroom apartment, Paul and I, and I'm pregnant, Terry and Fernando in another room, and Mark is on the couch in the living room.
Yeah.
And then I hear of other people have left, like Kenny Lipton. So I call Kenny, and Kenny comes, joins us. And then I hear Cheryl and Jean had left, and they come and join us. And we actually then were helping give people jobs and opportunities here in Vegas and our own little group. And that's where they inserted Dave LeBeau as the private investigator into our lives, who is now reporting on us, because people who were under the radar or even still in would come up to Las Vegas and visit with us.
Yeah, and we also had Jeff Walker.
Yeah, Jeff Walker. He came and worked with us.
And Jan Sims.
And Mickey Lipton.
That's right, Mickey Lipton.
And Jennifer
and the daughters.
Jennifer Lipton were here.
Kenny's daughters were here. I mean, we had a lot, and it was, we had a safe place for them to come, and also we could put them to work, and it was we were just all looking out for each other.
Yeah, I remember Jeff Walker lived with Paul and I for maybe 6 months until he got his feet on the ground.
And then he lived with me for a while too.
Yeah.
Yep. And anyway, we continue. We've had other people move to Vegas, and we've helped them out too from time to time. But the Aftermath Foundation does great work, with the money they have, and they're helping people. So anyway, that's what's going on with that.
Yeah, and we all still get together, several times. Every Friday there's at least 7 of us that have dinner together. Yeah. And then every now and again, birthdays, whatever, special events, there might end up as 20 of us all hanging out.
Speaking of which, my birthday's in 2 weeks. We need to plan something.
Okay.
Hint.
We'll have a pool party.
There you go. At Tom's. We still have to try it out as pool.
Yes.
Okay, great. This is going to be the last question here, everybody. Blow drill. I remember hearing about Norman not being able to leave because of being a trustee for the estate. How did DM gain control over him? Question. Well, I mean, he was a missionaire when David Miscavige was the action chief CMO int, and he and Captain Bill were sent on a lot of missions, and he was very reliable. He was a very good executive. And then he was brought into special unit when they were starting to take over the GO and get rid of the Guardian's office and the legal. And then he eventually was in author services, and he worked with Miscavige in author services, and they just basically created a bond there. But then I've heard after we left, and after L. Ron Hubbard's estate was turned over to CST, that Norman was, treated very poorly by Miscavige. He got busted several times, and, he was mistreated by him and all that. And I don't know if he's still alive or not, but he's been used on various hate videos. I know that. So anyway, you have anything to add on that?
I heard Norman is in a old folk home. Okay. I can't swear that that's true, but that is the rumor I have heard.
Yeah. Anyway, Norman was also the minister at Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes' wedding in Italy. He was the minister, the Scientology minister, when they did that. He also was the minister for Dave and Shelley's wedding as well, right, Janis? We had the photographs of that too.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. And I just messed it up. 1 second here, hide it. Okay, good. Anyway, everybody, we want to thank you all for being here. We hope it's been enlightening. We want you to please subscribe to our channel. As Janis says, rock slam that subscription button and subscribe. Okay, and also you can become a and you can become a member of our channel. Click the join on our channel homepage and get the different perks and stuff that we've got. I think you'll enjoy it. All right. Any questions we missed, ask in the comment section to this video. We check them all the time, and we will definitely answer them. Okay. And Janis, you have something you wanted to say about your daughter and something she's doing, right?
Oh, yes. Okay. We're all aging, And every now and again, you get these little aches and pains that just don't go away. Well, my daughter has a product. Her website is Healed by Oracle. And, I don't have a jar here with me, but it's a CBD salve. And I know I had some knee surgery. I'd hurt my knee, and at nighttime it was bothering me, and I'd put that on and I could go back to sleep. Another friend was having neck issues and started putting it on, and instead of going to the chiropractor 3 times a week, she went every 3 weeks because it had done so much for her muscles and relief of the pain. Another one, it was her whole hands were like this, and she started using it, and now her hands have opened up. But it's got emu oil in it, which helps the CBD pain relief absorb into the skin. And a lot of the other CBD lotions and stuff don't seem to have that, but that seems to be the key, is the emu oil to help it penetrate and carry it. So if you've got those aches and pains, I suggest you go to Healed by Oracle and buy some of her salve. I know John Horwich uses it. He has Bone on Bone, and he puts it on, and he's like, oh my God, this is such a relief. So try it out. You might look at it and go, my God, this is expensive for a 2-ounce jar or a 4-ounce jar, but it goes a long way and will last months, which makes it really worth it. And did I send you a picture of the jar?
I don't have it.
Oh,
but
you
anyway,
don't?
that's fine. We'll show it the next time. But anyway, yeah,
Okay.
It's a good product. It won't get you high, just so you know. The CBD does not get you high. But I've used it as well on my joints. And she's right. A little bit goes a long way. I mean, little bit, you can rub it into your skin. And she's totally right about that. I totally agree.
And
anyway.
Those aches and pains just go away.
Okay, everybody. Listen, join us on Saturday, Sea Org Day. We have a Sea Org Day celebration at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. We're going to do a live stream with Amy and Matt and Gary Jackson Moorhead. And it's going to be a laughing good time. So if you're interested, please join us for that live stream. And we'll have a lot of fun on Saturday talking about our days in the Sea Organization and Sea Org Day. Okay. All right, Janis, anything else you want to say before we end off?
Oh, I do want to say, for people who are following the policies on disconnection, if you're not a Scientologist, those policies don't apply to you. They only apply to those who have that prison of belief that those policies apply to them. So I suggest, if you have family members in the Sea Org or in the orgs that aren't communicating with you, don't apply those policies. They're not yours to apply. Communicate. Write letters to them. And if you're worried that security is going to look at your letters and open them up, well, they're the ones who are violating federal law by taking mail that is not addressed to them and opening it. So, and if you're worried and you don't know if they're receiving your letters or not, then put a small check in there. And if the check gets deposited, they got your mail. But I know that when my dad was not allowed to communicate with us, and he was public and we were declared, every year I sent him a calendar with everybody's birthday on it, all his grandchildren, and photographs. And throughout the year, I would send him photographs. And when we reconnected, he had kept every single one of those photos, had them in albums. And one year I got a total surprise. I got a phone call for my birthday. And I'm like, I hadn't heard from my father in 5 years. And he called me because he looked at my calendar and he saw it was my birthday. And he made that phone call just to wish me happy birthday. So there is goodness to that. So don't follow those disconnect policies and believe they're not yours. Communicate. That's what you need to do. Take photographs, send money, not cash because security might keep that, or whatever, but just communicate. That will help open up the flow for everybody.
Okay, well said, Janis. All right, everybody, until next time, we'll see you next show. Bye-bye.
Bye.